when you push yourself and you feel that emotional tension like eating up at you, that's where having the strategy, I have a job to do, and my job is as a friend. I could be jealous of a friend. Reach out to him. I'm celebrating you. I love you. This is so unbelievable. I'm so proud of you. But I don't need to pretend in my heart of hearts that like, yeah, there was a moment where I'm like, I'm in awe. Like I didn't do that. And you did. It's unbelievable. I felt that a few times. I'm proud of what I'm jealous of now.
Welcome back to another episode of That's an Issue. And we're going to take a turn in a different direction. Typically, we have psychologists and therapists and people that are talking to others to help work through and get through the issues that they're having. This week, we have on Rabbi Dr. Dovid Bashevkin. And he is someone who sat or actually lied down in the therapist's office because he was the patient, the person going through whatever challenge he's going through. And he opens up about his anxiety, his jealousy, and the things in his life that have been holding him back. And there's a few things about him. Even I've known him for years now. Good friend. He says a lot of very nice things about me. And so many things that I never knew about him. And I thought it was fascinating. And I think what he's doing is beautiful. And you're going to hear more about what he's doing at the end of this episode. You're going to also hear about our friends at Relief. Here is the Classics conversation with Dovid Bashevkin.
Mental health, relationships, those are loaded topics and something that affects every part of our lives. But we aren't having enough open conversations about it.
And that's an issue.
Welcome, Dovid Bashevkin.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah. What a joy to be here with both of you, truly.
Yeah, we're excited to have you. Why are you coming on a mental health podcast?
Well, that's a fair question.
Jumping right in.
No, I'm not a therapist. I admire therapists. I've spent, much of my life in and out of therapy. I'm here because I think very often what gets overlooked in a lot of these conversations is almost like the patient experience of like the journey through mental health treatment itself. And very often, particularly in our community, when there are like parenting seminars or dealing with mental health issues, we have like a murderer's row of psychologists and therapists. But very often what gets lost in the conversation are the people who are like the recipients of the guidance and how it works and what they've done and what they're struggling with and grappling with. So I think this work is so important to focus on mental health. And I'm here really on the other side. I'm not a mental health professional. I don't counsel people. I have an undergraduate, core major in psychology. That's as far as my knowledge goes.
Got it. Why do you think people don't talk about it?
I think for a host of reasons. I think there's a part, though I think it's smaller than we sometimes make it out to be, of communal stigma.
Right.
But I never talk about it like that. It's interesting. So, I have a podcast, 1840, and I one time was talking about like what we do and don't talk about. And I was talking with somebody, and I actually shared it later on air. And I said, we've never done the topic of mental health. And they were shocked. They were like, wait, no, you have. I remember you did a topic of mental health. And I said, no, we've never done it as a topic. We're covering it now, but we've never done it before. And I said, the reason why is because everything we do is mental health. Like mental health is the fabric. I don't think the way we should talk about mental health is like, let's ring a bell like it's Shabbos, like once a week. And like, now we should talk about mental health. Mental health is the healthiness of your sense of self, of your emotional regulation. This is a constant and continual conversation, and it should always be integrated in our religious discussions. So I've never participated in like the stomp out the stigma or like I'm going to reveal to the world now for the first time. I never had moments like that. I never thought of it like that. I don't even think it's healthy to feel it like that because it could backfire, because we spend so much time destigmatizing, making it seem like you need a whole celebration and a parade to tell somebody that you struggle with anxiety. My starting point is I only have one friend that I know who has never been to a therapist. It's just like, it's a given to me. So I think one reason is there is like a little bit of stigma, but we've almost like stigmatized the talking about the stigma. And then I think the real reason is that it's very hard to talk about yourself. It's very hard to disclose. It's very hard to be vulnerable. We spend most of our lives trying to fit in and to be normal. And part of when we talk about mental health now, we only talk about it insofar as it's normal. So now it's like kind of like cool to have like, oh, like I'm looking into myself. I have a therapist and this and that. And so people will reveal up until that much. But to really get into the weeds of the mechanics of our head can be very embarrassing, can be very vulnerable. And I think people spend most of their day-to-day lives trying to fit in and feel normal.
Like people don't want to be judged. Is that
I
sort of what you're saying?
I think people don't just want to be judged because I don't think it's that's the first reason. I think that's the outside world.
So meaning you don't want to be judged. You don't want to feel like you're not normal. So,
but I think it's something internal. It's that I don't want to talk about my darkest issues in public because it reminds me of them. Meaning we want to hide from them. We don't want to hide from society's judgment. We ourselves try to hide our struggles because it's much easier to be an upstanding member in the shul and an absolute miserable mess of a person at home, because then it's just left at home. And then when I step into shul, I don't have to talk about these issues. I don't have to address these issues. I don't have to come wholly into these public spaces. Instead, I can compartmentalize. And I think that is a strategy. And sometimes it can be semi-healthy.
Right, I was going to say, there's a part of that's a healthy thing.
Fully. And some of it is fully healthy.
We don't need to be sharing all our deepest, darkest secrets in public.
I fully agree. And sometimes it could lead to a brokenness because if it's compartmentalized too much in too narrow of a corner of your life, it can metastasize, meaning it can get worse and worse.
Yeah.
It's never addressed. And you think, okay, it's locked away over there. And the rest of my day, 95% of my day, is I am this, decent, outgoing, fun person. So that 5% can just stay locked there and they never really seek help.
You've written about anxiety as something you've struggled with.
Have I written about that? I certainly have struggled with anxiety. I've probably mentioned it's like the undercurrent of everything I write in a way.
Right.
But I'm sorry.
In Mishpacha, I think you wrote about in Mishpacha.
Oh, yes, I did. I did write about that in Mishpacha. Right. You're absolutely right. I'm so sorry.
Right. Got me off guard. I'm like, wait,
yeah, you're like, no. I did write about that in Mishpacha magazine. You're absolutely right.
Obviously, it was something you felt comfortable discussing.
Yes.
When did you know that you struggled with this?
My first memory of going to a therapist was in 5th grade. I was in Mrs. Shaitov's class in South Shore. I remember it very clearly. I realized I was struggling with it because I had it was very hard for me to fall asleep at night from a very young age. I could not sleep at night. I would get very nervous. And I had a very hard time. I'm going to use a fancy word, but I'm going to explain what it means. Like to individuate, to step away from the home. I felt like almost a helplessness. So I was afraid to sleep over. There was a lot of control issues.
I also I never liked sleeping over.
It wasn't like I didn't even like I wouldn't even just say not like it. Like the word sleepaway camp gave me anxiety. When I would hear all of my friends, Akiva and Yoni, talking about like Camp Monk in like 3rd and 4th grade, where they were all going and talking about it like it was Gan Eden, I remember like excusing myself and like going upstairs and having a pit in my stomach, realizing that in my mind, there was never going to come a time where I felt independent or whole enough to sleep away from home. Like I
were you like really close to your parents? Is that why?
I don't think it was because I am extraordinarily close to my parents. That relationship has only gotten closer over time. The more independent I got, the closer we became. I think that I probably had some type of like insecure attachment where I didn't feel ready yet to grow up. And I always felt, again, to get into like the real recesses of my head, I felt the tide of time sweeping me into adulthood from a very young age of just like, it is unavoidable. Year after year, your time is moving quickly. It's slipping through you. And I am not yet ready to like be independent in the world. So in 5th grade was the first time I went to a therapist. My family, I am very blessed to grow up in a family where mental health was something that was always discussed.
Yeah,
always,
that's amazing.
Always
For
spoken
the time.
about. Totally
awesome.
wasn't not at all. Like they suggested it like that, and that was the first time I went to a therapist. And I've been in and out. It's very hard to like get the relationship to click, but I've been in and out, I would say, nearly my entire life.
Wow.
Wait, could I ask?
Please.
Do you think you were that 2 or 3-year-old who cried when your mother dropped you off at school?
Oh, I know I was.
Like, so you were born with
it.
this. I'm getting to like the nature nurture
Yeah.
piece.
Like
there's a major nature piece here.
Well, one of the beauties of my family is that aside from the fact that we were not judgmental about mental health, I grew up, and I don't know, you have to find the right level at each child's age, but we didn't just talk about what I was experiencing. I felt like I grew up in a world understanding that this is something that was in the nature of my family. And they were able to address it at a young age. And I didn't feel so alone. In some ways, you felt like a specialness, when it was being managed well. But I know my whole family history, not just my parents, my grandparents, my great-grandparents. I know what their personalities were like, what they were predisposed to. So you end up, I think, knowing your own family history, not just your parents, but like a generation, even 2 generations up, gives you just a little bit of a wider picture to see that you were born into something, that you may have a predisposition towards something. And we do this all the time with diabetes. We do it all the time with all other Ashkenazi illnesses. We do.
Right.
But I think specifically with mental health is to understand the universe that you were brought into, and to understand
Did you ever get over the fear of going to sleepaway camp? Did you ever go to sleepaway camp?
Yeah, great question. I went during bar mitzvah season. Was really
It's like 7th, 8th grade.
challenging for me. I did not get over it in bar mitzvah season. It wasn't just sleeping over. I slept with the lights on. I couldn't sleep in the dark. I had 1 or 2 successful sleepovers. There's one I remember. I went to Hillel Novak's bar mitzvah in, I believe, the Washington Hotel. Do you remember those weekend bar mitzvahs?
Yeah.
Thank God that people don't make weekend bar mitzvahs as much as they used to.
No.
The anxiety I used to feel, and I would turn all of them down, is I was able to get to Hillel Novak's bar mitzvah, and I was able to go on my 8th grade trip to Washington. That took a tremendous amount of coaching. I remember being on my deck outside of my house, pacing back and forth with my mother, like trying to get ready. And my mother, who was incredible with me through all of this, like really having a parent who was in tune and understood and knows how to walk a child through this, was very helpful. But my mother also tipped off, and I'm so grateful to her that she did, Rev Chanina Hertzberg of blessed memory, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, who was the Menahel of South Shore.
Yep.
And he said he was going to look after me. And I remember he was very subtle, very quiet. He saw I was having a good time. Once I stepped out and I was there, I was able to operate, but I did not fully get over sleeping over, I would say, until midway through my 9th grade. It was the first time I slept over without needing extensive coaching.
Wow.
Well, could we go back to the therapy in 5th grade? Like, you remembering the therapy? What did the therapists do with you?
It was play therapy. Well, I saw 2 different therapists in elementary school, and I'm having a little bit of trouble trying to remember, but I have vivid memories of both. One of them was play therapy, and that I remember, like I knew it was play therapy. I was like one of those like precocious type of person who would use the word precocious, just like one of those like people who just like, okay, I know what this is. Like we're playing, but you're seeing how I play. Like I kind of like figured it out. And I was on good behavior. The other one did something that you're probably familiar with, and it's wild because it was in 5th grade and it still sticks to me. Was doing some form, I don't know if it was hypnosis, but was asking me to remember. It asked me to remember, like I would lay back and ask me to remember a memory where I felt totally calm and at ease. And I remember I said swimming in my Zadie's pool in Florida. And then he would have me like focus and clench up and build tension on each extremity of my body and then release that tension. That was in 5th grade.
Cool.
And I remember that exercise, and I still do some of those exercises today. Like I've picked up a lot since then, but it was just remarkable that like he was able to get through to a 5th grader and figure out how to calm them, how to diffuse and de-escalate, which, you know, just the grind of life as a parent. I have young children myself. Parents by nature, I myself, like we usually just escalate emotions because, you know, you see your kid upset and they do something wrong and then you yell at them and then they get even, and just introducing to kids' lives how to de-escalate, real strategies beyond, you know, parents' normal strategy, which is saying with as much fury and frustration, relax. You know, like you're always like yelling, would you just relax? Like you're most,
calm down.
You're stressed, calm down. Like you're all stressed out. That obviously doesn't work. That just escalates it. And
You know, I can relate a little bit to your background because when I was a kid, I also had a tremendous fear to sleep over anyone's house. There was actually like a funny.
You never went to sleepaway camp.
I didn't
but
go.
you did.
So
You
hold on,
still
hold on,
went though.
Hold on. I'll you know, tell you the story. Basically, when I was in 5th grade or 6th grade, whatever it was, I didn't go beforehand for sure. But there was this joke that there was like the Sleepover Club, even though I was the one of 3 members, and the joke was that I was in the Sleepover Club that never slept over anybody because I couldn't make it through the night. The fear was that I had the opposite. I couldn't sleep with any light. So like for me, the fear of going to somebody's house and not being able to sleep was so like stressful that I was like, I can't do this.
I can't do it.
Right. So
you need to be pitch dark.
I liked it dark. Yeah. So like for me,
too scary.
Yeah.
Too scary.
So for me, it was mamish the habit,
Uh-huh.
and I couldn't go to. I once went to sleepaway camp, and I went to Muggen Av, and I clearly remember. It's just so funny as being like as an adult now, like not having the issue of being afraid to sleep away, but as a kid remembering that like it was so frustrating that like my bed was like near the window and the light by the pool was shining, and I literally slept with sunglasses. I don't blame you. Not a joke. I remember even wearing them, and I'm like, this is so crazy. This was like in 5th grade, and when I hit 7th grade, I'm like, I kept pushing the limit. I can't not go to sleepaway camp. I have to go. Like I would just go and be miserable, like absolutely miserable. Crying on the bus would be horrible. Total disaster. And then I had a good friend of mine who I was close with. His name is actually Maishi Spiegel, who you know. And he lost his father in 3rd grade, I think. And I was like miserable. Like the first day of Camp Naram, I was sitting by the entrance to the bungalow or the bunkhouse, and I looked like I must have been like bawling like 5 minutes ago. And he sits down next to me and he's like, yeah, I remember when I lost my father. But it'll go away. And I'm thinking like, what? Like this guy,
because it was so much bigger.
It was so like it just shifted my entire perspective, and like that was it. It just like right there is when it just like the whole fear just immediately gone. Like it was like the craziest thing. I looked at him. I'm like, what am I nervous? Like, what am I upset about? Like, this is ridiculous.
And it was done.
And then right there,
I didn't have a moment like that. I kind of, again, for me, it was that sense of being able to be independent outside of my own home and like having that confidence. And I don't think I was. It happened very slowly. There were 2 breakthroughs in 8th grade. You know, the bar mitzvah and the trip. Then in 9th grade, a lot of it I owe to the Rabbeim I had in 9th grade. Gave me a lot of confidence and excitement. And once I had that, then I was finally able. I think my 9th grade trip, I was able to leave without being coached. That trip to Boston.
Wow. So the other thing I did, because I remember bugging out about not being able to sleep, was like I would think to myself, you know what? So I won't sleep.
So I had
and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to stay up the whole night. And then once I allowed myself,
these are all therapy approaches. Everything that you guys are saying.
Like, what's the worst that can happen?
And I'm thinking like, okay, so you know, like worst case scenario, I'll stay up the entire night till 5 o'clock and I'll daven nates. Like, what am I worried about?
I always tell myself
and
that.
Then I'm like, oh, it's okay. And then I like fell asleep with the light on. I'm like, I'm sleeping with the light on, and that was legit a another thing. Those two pieces were just like,
there's a sketch.
I can't explain.
There's
what
a
it was.
sketch show, a comedy show on Netflix, which I don't know if I'm allowed to reference, but here we are, called I Think You Should Leave. And in I Think You Should Leave, one of the sketches is about somebody who wears virtual reality, like goes on a virtual reality shopping spree. So he's wearing the virtual reality sunglasses or glasses, and all of a sudden in the middle of it, he doesn't know how to move in the virtual reality world. And then all of a sudden he takes off the glasses. He's like, I forgot how to move always. And he's just like frozen in place.
That's funny.
That was me with sleeping in my own head, where I would be like, in the middle of the night, I would be wondering, like, how did I ever fall asleep? Like, how did I turn off my brain? And the more you think about it, then the more hyper conscious you're aware. So a lot of my issues were sleep related, but to this day, it's not really an issue for me because of that strategy where I really embrace maybe I'll be up all night. I only get nervous falling asleep if I have a flight the next morning. I still have trouble because if I know if I'm up all night and then I'm not going to be able to be at the flight, or I have a meeting in the morning, that's when falling asleep becomes very, very challenging. Otherwise, I deliberately don't try to schedule things early in the morning because I know that it's going to affect my sleep the night before.
Right. So the concept though that I've been using, this defense of like, so I'll stay up the whole night, doesn't work with certain types of anxieties, such as where you actually are nervous about death, right? So like where you basically, what that strategy is, what's the worst case scenario?
Yeah.
The worst case scenario is you don't sleep. That's okay. So you don't sleep, so you wake up.
Yeah.
But if you're like on a plane, let's say.
Yeah.
And what's the worst case scenario?
Is that you're going to fall down from the sky.
That you'll die. It's like hard to get out of that. Like your worst case scenario is not okay.
Yeah.
So that strategy fails.
Right.
That's right. Doesn't work.
I don't know why my anxiety.
I don't want to give you a new one.
No. Anxiety. I've never had anxiety about death. Not anxiety in that way. In some ways, when you're so anxious, I mean, this is one of the scarier things about like suicidal ideation, is that if anything, when you're really crazy anxious, you're just looking for anything to turn your mind off. So that's not the scary thing. The angst of anxiety for me has always been the unknownness of the future, finding your purpose, your sense of self. I find very often that a lot of the anxiety is fueled oftentimes by jealousy. That's an emotion that I feel like isn't spoken about enough in the mental health world.
How does that work?
I think that you can learn a lot about somebody, and I think to myself very often that I could tell the story of my life at each stage based on who I am jealous of, because what you are jealous of is oftentimes a tell of what you are trying to be and become, and paying attention to those feelings. Jealousy is something we usually associate with like fourth graders or third graders, like young children. Adults, I think jealousy, more than anxiety and depression, is a stigmatized emotion. People don't like saying that I feel jealous. And I think it's an important emotion to pay attention to, because it oftentimes can be a window into what you are grappling and becoming, or your own uncertainty of what you are in the present. And I try to pay a lot of attention, especially because I'm in the public square. What is animating my jealousy? When you're in yeshiva, I was always been a jealous person, and in some ways jealous, not in like the way jealousy is sometimes portrayed as like these like green eyes, I want to take it away from you. Not in that, but like looking at other people and feeling an inadequacy that leads to a jealousy that like, I wish I had that form of success. And I think at each period in my life, I had different people and things and situations that would grab my attention and kind of needle at my own feelings of inadequacy, that I wasn't having enough because this person has something that I very much want to be and become. And I think paying attention to what makes you jealous can in many ways be a window to what you're grappling with emotionally.
Right.
But then you would call that anxiety? I mean, I would call that like insecurity.
Yes, I wouldn't call that anxiety.
So then how does that lead to the anxiety?
Great, because for me at least, what what the experience of anxiety, of overwhelming anxiety, is usually a function of feeling misaligned with my present and this unknown and mystery of the future. I don't feel that there's like a direction. I don't know where I'm moving towards. It's this like sense of like lack of control and being bereft within your own life. Like I am not in control of my own story, of my own life, which ultimately is true. We're not fully in control of our lives, and learning how to be comfortable with that is the key to everything. But the times that I have the most anxiety, it's usually when I'm transitioning professionally, transitioning into a relationship romantically, transitioning religiously, starting a new yeshiva, I would always feel these pangs of anxiety. Now, to me, the root of that is this sense of like inadequacy in knowing who I am and what I contribute and what I can do. And that ball of inadequacy that lives in my heart is also what gives rise to jealousy. The more purposeful I feel, the more aligned I am in my present of my life, the less jealous I feel of others, and the more and the less anxiety generally I feel. It was a little bit, but the less anxiety I feel because I feel aligned in my life, and it's really, really helpful.
We'll be right back to this week's conversation with Dovid, and you are going to hear him open up way more. You're going to hear the Kleshchiks open up, and conversations that we've never had on this podcast, and it's great. So if you're enjoying this, by the way, go ahead and share it with others. But we first want to acknowledge the fact that so many people go to therapy. We know this is something that's happening. We know everyone's going through some form of challenge in their life. And if you're always thinking, hey, I wish I had the right therapist to talk about this with, you could call Relief. Their website is reliefhelp.org. You give them a call at 718-431-9501 or send them an email at info@reliefhelp.org. And I love that in this episode, we're going to discuss finding the right therapist. And that is the role of Relief, to pair you together with the therapist to deal with the anxiety, the depression, the marital issues, the help that your children need. Whatever it is, Relief is there to be the shadchan, to find the right person to connect you with. And you should definitely go ahead and look in the show notes, the links that are there to connect with Relief so they could help you get over the next challenge or the challenges you're going through in your life with the right person. Now back to this week's episode.
I will say that, because part of the issue that you bring up about jealousy and I'd also, just to bring home that point there, is that it could be that you're also moving the goalposts, right? Like if you go somewhere and then you look up to somebody and you're like, I'm less adequate than that person, then you've just created, and then I'm not comfortable in my own skin, but you've also increasing the height of where you want to go, and you're constantly going to increase, climb a higher and higher mountain.
Jealousy could be great. I mean, jealousy is one of the, and let me be clear: the people I am jealous of are people I love,
and that you probably look up to, or I'm jealous of Yaakov Langer. I'll be.
No. Why can't I say that? Why can't I say that? Why can't I celebrate him? He is one of my closest friends. We work together. We partner together. There is undoubtedly, and we do very different things, but there's undoubtedly a piece of me when I see what he has built and what he has accomplished. As much, I celebrate him. I text him. I'm close enough with him, and this is part of me managing to be able to tell him, I am jealous of you. I'm jealous of what you built. When I see, again, there's this thing in the podcast world, which I hate, and I've done it a few times, but I hate it, where you put when your episode goes number 1 or whatever, and you're posting the rankings and this. I don't like that stuff because it eats at my competitive spirit and all that inadequacy. I do it too, so I'm just as guilty. But I don't like that. But in my own head, if I see somebody, a friend who I love, and I can celebrate them, accomplish something, there's real inadequacy that comes up. Why have I been like flopping around on YouTube? I don't get nothing moves. I don't know how to do it. I messed up. He has all these and he started, in some ways, started after me, and he built this massive empire. I don't kill myself for those feelings. I allow myself to explore them, and I push myself deliberately When Yaakov hit 1 million subscribers on YouTube, I mean this seriously.
No, I love this. Is so
I
like
made
real
it-
and genuine. I
No.
love
I'm in the
love
room on the
this.
thing,
Yeah, Yaakov is right here.
Please.
No, I want to say something real. I want to say something real because these are real feelings that
Yeah.
people do and they don't talk about them. There were 2 moments where I believe I pushed myself to privately and probably publicly, but like to privately congratulate them. Now that is an exploration. I'm sure he appreciated my congratulations, and he's legit a friend of mine. I'm just being like perfectly clear. But in some ways we compete, and when I look at people do that and accomplish that, I push myself. I listen to my anxiety. I listen to my jealousy. I listen to those feelings of inadequacy bubble up. I pay attention to it. I don't say, "Oh, don't be jealous." Say a vartlach like lo sachmo, Ibn Ezra. Like
Right.
I try to pause. I try to pause, pay attention to why am I jealous? Why am I feeling this way? Explore it, and I push myself always. And I believe I did it in this case. Send them a text. Send them a text and say, "Wow, that's an amazing accomplishment. I'm so happy for you. Continued success." When you push yourself and you feel that emotional tension like eating up at you, that's where having the strategy, I have a job to do, and my job is as a friend. I could be jealous of a friend. Reach out to him. I'm celebrating you. I love you. This is so unbelievable. I'm so proud of you. But I don't need to pretend in my heart of hearts that like, yeah, there was a moment where I'm like, I'm in awe. Like I didn't do that. And you did. It's unbelievable. I felt that a few times. I'm proud of what I'm jealous of now because it's very rarely like, oh, the next door neighbor got a new car. Like that stuff I don't even notice. I don't think about it. They redid their kitchen. That stuff doesn't bother me. But I'm, in the public square, you're trying to command some form of influence or attention or share. There is a competitiveness there, and learning to explore that without falling apart, learning to explore those feelings that sometimes happen against your will without the inadequacy taking over your whole sense of self or without your own purposefulness unraveling can be a really difficult thing. And I think people do not pay enough attention to what makes them jealous, what is triggering them. We use the word jealous again. It's like a 4th grade term. It's like a term that people use in 3rd grade. Like grown-ups, we don't get jealous. We already heard the idea from the Ibn Ezra on Lo Sachmod, which I'm not going to repeat now, but you can look it up. But, we already heard the Torah. We know it's one of the 10 commandments, so that's not my issue. No, I think people go through life and they have competitiveness with people they love and their friends. And I think part of what social media has done to society is we stopped paying attention in that really honest way to what makes us jealous and what makes us look back at our own lives and see blandness or a lack of excitement or engagement in our own lives. And I think a lot of that stems from not being willing to explore these feelings that we've been told from 3rd grade are wrong.
Right.
People get jealous.
Right.
Rabbis get jealous.
It so backfires. Like that's the way of just making it.
Yeah.
Like growing it.
Yeah.
Is to say that's wrong to feel.
But it also it's also a very motivating piece. Like part of what makes you put in that extra effort. Like when if you're starting a new business or if you're doing a new podcast,
It's so important.
like to
Well,
be
pay attention to it.
But
Yeah.
if you're on that level of you're really jealous of things that you feel you want to accomplish, meaning
You know who else I'm jealous of?
I think
Can
a
give you
lot of
another
people
example?
are not
please.
jealous of those things. People are jealous of very material things
Like-
that really don't say anything about you
But
as a
explore it.
person. No, I'm not saying not to
Yeah.
explore it,
like
but
The
it's
other
not,
person I'm
it's not
jealous
always
of-
to
Yeah.
a point of helping.
Because it came
Please.
to mind. He's another podcast. I spent too much time talking about how jealous I am of Yaakov. Though I just need to be clear, I'm a lovely guy. He's a great guy.
Who?
Yaakov Langer, allegedly. The 1 or 2 times we've met. The other, there's a close friend of mine. He also has a podcast universe. His name is Ari Lamb. Wonderful individual. I love him. One of my closest friends. He's accomplished certain things. I remember I think he got published in the Wall Street Journal the first time. And the reason why I'm bringing it up, because this is a motivator. I was beyond jealous. Like that's something that would like trigger me. Like, oh man, like he's like I'm sitting here playing, yokel dokel in, I don't know, some Jewish weekly, I don't know, answering.
Mishpacha.
No, not even that, like reading I don't know, like it just didn't feel as real. It didn't feel as, and I remember like I pushed myself. He recently had like a public conversation with Elon Musk on social media. And I remember like my brain fell out of my head with feelings of inadequacy. I'm like, oh my God, I'm trying to get like mid-tier Jewish leaders to answer my emails, and the man is speaking like on my brain fell out of my head. And that was another time that two things happened. Number one, I pushed myself to reach out and say, I'm so happy for you. What an amazing success. What an unbelievable. Explore the feeling and then try to channel it into like building a connection. Don't like distance yourself. So many friendships fall apart because you didn't push yourself to celebrate the thing that was making you jealous. So you were distant, and then you want the friend to notice, and you want them to reach out to you and apologize for their success. And that a lot of that happens when people are getting married. You know, you start
That's
distancing
what I was thinking.
yourself. You're not really fully happy for them, so you're like a little coldish to them because you're jealous and you're frustrated. I did this, and so many friendships fall apart. You want me to apologize now? I shouldn't have gotten married. I shouldn't have gotten this published. I shouldn't have had a successful business. So then you get distance, and then they lash out, and then a great friendship falls apart. So I pushed myself. The second thing I did is I started submitting to the Wall Street Journal.
Right.
It motivated me. It's wonderful. Meaning paying attention to the feelings can be an incredible motivator.
Right.
Into saying, what is the next tier? That's why I said,
as opposed to breaking it down.
Correct. But explore what are those things and make sure you're being jealous of the right. I'm proud of what makes me jealous.
Right.
I am proud of the people who make me jealous. But just make sure that circle of who you're competing with, because I know life's not a competition. I got the memo. I saw the poster. But you know what? People feel competitive. It's part of our nature as social animals,
and especially in America, where we live in capitalism. It's not like we're in a socialist country.
Yes, it's in America. There's a book called Born Loser. It's a phenomenal book, and the entire book is about how in the very fabric of America, it actually begins in the 1840s. Heyo, but in the entire fabric of America, this sense of being a self-made success.
Right.
That story created a different story. And that's the story of being a loser and being a failure and being a nebuch. And I think a lot of people struggle with that. And I sometimes interact with people and I can tell from the way they're carrying themselves and the way they talk about themselves. And I said, there's somebody still in your head or maybe in your home or maybe in the office who makes you feel like a nebuch. So, and you've never given yourself, had rachmanos, had the compassion to explore those feelings. So you lash out. So that anybody who makes you feel those feelings even a little bit, you have to puff up your chest and feel like, oh, I'm a big deal. And we walk around like this, not paying attention to these underlying factors that are really quietly behind the scenes steering our relationships, our friendships, how we interact with people.
Do you ever, I know that from some of the other things you've said, on other shows that you like reading.
I do like reading. I love reading. That's so crazy. How did you find that out about me? I've never shared that before.
And I like reading too. I don't think I read as much as you though. But do you feel like you pick up some of this jealousy from some of the people who you read about? Like sometimes if you're reading a biography or of someone great or something that someone did, you're like, wow, that person accomplished X, Y, and Z. Like, what have I done?
Never, not a once. I think part of the nature of jealousy is I am jealous. To quote a line from, I'm pausing if I should be quoting from this movie, but you know what? Let's have fun. Let's get crazy. To quote a line from one of the great villains in all of movie history, Hannibal Lecter, in the movie Silence of the Lambs, where the way that he helps Clarice Starling, played by Jodie Foster, Anthony Hopkins, of course, plays Hannibal Lecter. He talks about jealousy in that movie, And the way that they catch the villain in the movie, again, the movie is not appropriate for young children. Probably not appropriate for adults either, but here we are. But the way he catches them is that, again, spoiler alert, is he said, this villain coveted. He wanted things that other people had. And where do you covet? Where does coveting begin? And he says, you only covet what is around you in your immediate area, in your immediate community, in your space. You don't covet. I don't covet what I read in books. It doesn't make me jealous. What reading has always done for me was given language for the experiences I was having. There are certain books that I've read, a lot of those children's books, but even into adulthood, gave me language to describe what I was feeling and what I was experiencing. So books were always like an imagined universe that I could step in and feel normal and feel surrounded, because you construct the world that you are reading. So reading was always a haven. It was a place not to escape the regular world,
Got it.
but a place to feel at home.
Because I definitely picked that up a little bit about myself. Like I'll read about, like right now I'm reading a book on, I thought the book was small. It's called Napoleon. And it's like 800 pages. It's this huge book.
And you're struggling with jealousy of Napoleon.
Like that. Yeah, straight up. Like that guy He
did a lot.
He did a lot.
As much
as like
didn't end well.
As much as like
even
if I'm thinking like, wow, my podcast.
He convened the Sanhedrin.
Right,
he did a lot. Yeah.
Like I really want to get to a lot of views, but I'm like, I never conquered Italy.
Yeah, you never did.
Like this guy. This guy was a short guy. Like I'm a short guy. This guy was a short guy. No, really, we do height.
That's a real thing. That's a real thing. Pause right there.
Yeah.
And we don't have to talk about this now. I'm the guest, so I'm not directing a line of questioning.
Sure.
I think there is a typology, and it's similar to what I'm talking about, where height, which becomes and feeling short and being short, which is such a differentiator when you are in elementary school, where I think so many of our issues that plague us our entire life are the unresolved questions and the unresolved issues that we never explored and addressed properly from second and third grade. Jealousy, you hurt my feelings, learning how to build relationships. But I think sometimes height is a good example of that, where somebody feels short and there's something like almost like inescapable, that there are certain people in their lives that still bring them back to that fourth grade mentality where you're not picked first for basketball because that's the ultimate, sorter of people's social setting. I'm sorry, I'm going on to a psychological exploration of my host. But that's a real thing, and I feel like nobody talks about it. Nobody talks about it.
Well,
feeling short,
right? Well, to be fair, like the average height of a CEO in the United States is over 6 feet.
Yes.
Right. So being short is not just a fourth grade.
There is some
to command a room. Right. When you're in a room and you want to command the respect of everybody around you, the reason why people are they bring on tall CEOs, it's true, is because it's easier for those folks to command the board or command the shareholders or command.
I think it's the opposite. I think like what came first, the chicken or the egg?
Oh, I don't know if
why does the tall person have that confidence? Because like he's saying, from when they were a young kid, they were given whatever. Meaning it started.
The Gemara says Sanhedrin has to be.
Look at Napoleon. Then go back to your Napoleon example.
You have to be tall. The Sanhedrin, you have to be tall. It says a short person's disqualified. And you could be brilliant.
What?
I don't know
For
if the
real?
disqualification is just being 5'7".
No,
or 5'6".
Sanhedrin has to be somebody that you respect, and the Gemara says, I think even in Sanhedrin, that you cannot be a short judge, because a short judge will not.
I may be referring to something else, but
So you think that's not?
I don't think it's if you're 5'6". I think even Rav Moshe Feinstein could have served on the Sanhedrin, and he was.
He was what, 5
feet? Yeah, 5 feet tall. But we can discuss that at a different time. I'm not here to talk about. That's our second Sanhedrin reference to this podcast. Didn't expect so many Sanhedrin references.
I guess what I was trying to say is that the fact that Napoleon was somebody that was a short fellow who accomplished a lot is somebody that a lot of people could look up to and be like, yes, I feel like I'll ever be anything like him? No, but there's definitely like, wow, that guy accomplished, whether or not you believe that what he did was the correct thing. But it's a matter of like looking at someone else's life and being able to pull something out of there and then use that to be able to keep pushing in your own life. I'm on
the flip side where I think for books, for me, have given me a great comfort, especially when you are invited into the inner lives of leaders and you see that there are people who were paid enormous amounts of money and achieved incredible things throughout their life, and yet throughout their lives they struggled with mental health issues. And that for me is one of the great comforts, because it tells you that there is no rung that is going to solve the enemy that lives inside of you. The enemy is not X amount of dollars. The enemy is not X amount of followers. It is not, if I conquer this, then I'm going to solve all of my issues. I don't think, and I think part of the reason why people struggle with therapy is because we want an end game. And I think therapy in some ways has sold out a little bit to that desire where patients are like, okay, 10 sessions and then I'm done. I think a part of what therapy is trying to address is lifelong. It's the rest of your life. There's no amount of money. There's no relationship. There's nothing that is going to fully solve and have you be fully aligned. And the therapeutic process, or where it should, in my opinion, be focusing the microscope on, is on life itself and the way you filter and react to life. And that's going to grow with you your entire life. And what moves me the most is seeing people who were on this journey their entire lives. And it wasn't like, oh, I solved them, I addressed them. I hope people are able to cope with them better. They have better strategies. Right. But this is lifelong. For me, I know it's lifelong. There's nothing that could happen in my life, no amount of money, no professional success, that is going to cure my mental health issues. I know that. The only thing that can happen is that I can become more self-aware. I become more proactive. Periods of real darkness can become shorter, more confined, find a way out from them. Not, God forbid, ever doing something that is dangerous or harmful to yourselves. All of those things. But the understanding that this is lifelong, and we have too many people who are walking around day to day and their unresolved issues are being taken out on all of those around them, whether it's family, whether it's children, whether it's colleagues, whether it's people in shul. I think, unfortunately, we are oftentimes surrounded by people who haven't fully addressed a lot of their issues, and that's a real challenge.
I want to just go back to what I think you was saying before in terms of I think this is what you're saying, what you were saying about you're always like upping. There's always like the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And I think that I just want to make that connection, because I don't think it was clear before what you were trying to say, is that it's not the next thing that's going to make you happy, or that, like what you're saying, or going to cure your anxiety or cure your jealousy or insecurity or whatever word we want to use. It's not about the outside. It's not about the material things. It's not about the accomplishments. It's about you inside as a person. Learning how to manage. I like the word manage. It's a good word. Cope, manage, not get rid of it.
Correct. The things that nourish me most are the things that take place in private and that nobody sees. The things that nourish me most emotionally, and the things that nourish me most religiously. I think a lot of the structure, the religious structure of our community is very, for me at least, is very challenging, because a lot of it is very public facing. Like, oh, are you going to the Tish or to the Farbrengen or to these big events where we're expected? That's what's going to nourish us most. And I find for myself, like, all I want in this world religiously in my closest relationships is just like 10 seconds of sincerity, of real connection, without cameras, without social media, without I'm going to use this for a story. I'm just like, the thing I find most nourishing in my life is sincerity, without a doubt. And I think it's much harder in such a carefully manicured and designed world that we live in. Both religiously, our religious worlds are very designed. Sometimes our relationships could be very designed, especially in the dating stage. A very hard time dating because of this. And all I ever want is just sincerity, of just a moment to be real and sincere with somebody, which doesn't mean not to be funny or joyful, doesn't mean to be super serious, but just sincere connection. That's what I want in this world. That's what I think most people want in this world. And it's become increasingly more challenging to capture and find.
Can you elaborate a little bit about that? What do you meant by the dating? Like, what do you?
I think that the process of dating is very self-conscious, and it is it is all geared towards a very specific decision, rightfully so, which is, do you want to get married? But in the current dating system, the markers that we have of whether or not the relationship is healthy, I think for some people, myself included, add a layer that makes it very hard to engage sincerely with the other. These markers of like, did you drop shotgun? Well, you're on the fourth date, sixth date. Well, do you know? Do you know yet? Eighth date. Well, you should really know by now. It's been 2 months. You should know something. All of those, like, it was almost that self-conscious layer that makes falling asleep so hard, where you're like, I should be asleep by now. I should be in love by now. And you start to get self-reflexive. You start to be self-conscious. You start to think back. Your mind folds in on itself, on your own decision-making process, which is not organic, which is not sincere. You're trying to, am I doing the right thing? Quick. And it doesn't allow sincere, organic relationships to form. So for me, and I think for many, but for me, there was a period where I realized this structure of the shidduch system adjacent to the community that I began in is not going to be the way that I'm going to find the final destination. I need something that has a little less structure to it. I want to find somebody a little bit more naturally. And I think people should allow themselves with that. I personally don't think there's a terrible issue with the shidduch system. I just think that we need to guide more people to find the structures or lack of structures that work best for them. And I think we do a disservice if we don't like tell people and like just be honest and sincere with people. Like, maybe you need something else. Maybe you need a different system. Maybe you need a different yeshiva. I'm thinking it's all part of similar problems, religious growth, romantic growth, emotional growth, all share these commonalities where we have these systems that are designed to address our issues within our emotional issues, our religious issues, our romantic issues. And sometimes what's really holding you back is that this isn't the right structure. This isn't the right institution. This isn't the right community that's going to address and get you to where you want to be. Right. And I wish there was more fluidity of people going back and forth.
Right.
Good point.
No, it goes back to what you're saying about being self-aware.
Yes.
That's like, that's just the key to all of this is to really be self-aware and to look into yourself.
It depends on the person. I wish I was less self-aware in the literal sense, because part of, certain personalities or ways of thinking that you become more prone to anxiety is when you are very like hyper conscious of how you're coming off, how you're being perceived, how you're thought. But there are people who are predisposed to that, myself included. And for those kind of people, you really want to find the communities, the people, the relationships, the systems that are going to allow you to build a life organically, that you're not constantly feel like you're carrying a 50-pound knapsack through life, that will allow you to put it down and just be natural and normal. Thank God the community I live in, the family that I built have all been geared towards that, which is why there's very oftentimes people are like surprised to find out either where I live or what my family looks like or all these things. I'm like, all of this is a reaction to create a space in my life that is sincere, that is real, that is not under the general public microscope that we subject ourselves to necessarily, because the world is changing.
It's interesting.
Awesome. So we learned a few stuff, right? We got the anxiety is good unless, to propel you. Could be very challenging if it's too much. And to see the interplay between jealousy and anxiety, to see how that could either affect you in a negative way, but also in a positive way.
The one thing I didn't mention, which I think is important, is I mentioned that strategy, when that first therapist when I was in 5th grade taught me about
progressive muscle relaxation.
Is that what it's called? Progressive muscle. I knew there must be because I knew what I was experiencing.
Look it up on YouTube. There's a lot of.
Is that specifically for young children?
It works very well with young children. It works better than
it's
like
meditation. My whole life. Do you understand? This is more than 30 years ago. This is about 30 years ago that I was, and it's stuck with me my whole. I can still take myself back to that. It's fantastic. The other thing that helped me is I had a therapist that, number one, was recommended to me by one of my closest friends, the person who really opened me up to the world of mental health struggle. I'll mention his name publicly. We have an episode where we talk about his journey through this. His name is Eli Shulman. He's a lawyer, but there's not another person I have seen who has done more serious work in self-discovery than my friend Ellie. And Ellie, actually, I would talk to him about this, and I found him to be incredibly profound, and he connected me to a therapist who I saw for many years in my 20s. I actually reached out to him pretty recently, not because I was going through something. I mean, I was going through something, but that's not why I actually reached out. I reached out to him recently because Jonah Hill produced this documentary celebrating his therapist called, I think his name is Stutz, right? And I watched this documentary. It was like an ode to his therapist, and I was like, wow, that's so moving and so beautiful. Yeah. I reached out to this therapist who I had. It was one of two therapists who really transformed who I am, and he taught me about I hate using this word, so take it out and don't put it in the title because I'm not that guy.
Okay.
But he spoke to me about mindful breathing.
You don't like the word mindfulness?
I hate it.
What's wrong with that?
It's the same as like mental health stigma. It just became another word and like article in like, I don't know, Business Insider, like 5 tips to create mindfulness at work. It's just like, it just became
It's
word.
a buzzword, yeah.
And it's not sincere and it's not real. And what it was originally addressing in my life is so personal and so sincere. That's the word. I don't even like.
But that's what mindfulness is supposed to be.
Yeah, but it's just I don't like the way it's
got
spoken
taken
about.
out of hand.
I don't like the way it's spoken
Got
about.
marketed too much.
And the book that I read, he introduced me because they had the same teacher. Is somebody named Pima Chodron, and she wrote this book called How to Meditate, and this way of breathing in a certain way. Or I one time had a panic attack at an airport, not because I was afraid to fly, but I was flying out on Yom Kippur. You could look up, this is a real story. It's too much to get into, but I'm not a football fan. I'm not a college football fan, but when I was lost in my 20s, I was a broken person. I mean that seriously. And somebody called me up. I was working at the OU and said the Cornhuskers, which are a college football team, Big Red, I think they're called. The Cornhuskers opening game is on Yom Kippur, and we want to fly somebody out to run a Yom Kippur service for the Jews in Omaha, Nebraska, or Lincoln, Nebraska was the town over. And I said, I'll go. I was like Yonah. I was like my literal Yonah story. I wasn't going to, I was running away from home. I don't want to be where I am. And that flight where I was about to fly and spend Yom Kippur without a minion, without a dot, like I was scared. I thought it was gonna be the end of my life, but that's not what was making me nervous. That aloneness, that isolation, and I had a panic attack in the airport. I started crying. I remember I think it was LaGuardia, right outside the Delta terminal, and I was like pacing back and forth. I was crying. It's a freaky thing to see somebody crying alone outside an airport. I was
like a backpack.
Yeah, it's like wondering, like, do people like what do people think is about to happen right now? How was I perceived? They think I got a middle seat. Like I was like, what do they think he's crying about? But I was crying, and I called my therapist, and he said, I want you to go from one end of the terminal to the other, and the only thing I want you to think about is your steps. And every time your mind wanders, notice it. Notice that it's wandering. You don't have to be upset, and return back to your steps, which is the same as what you do with your breath. And it was the first time that I saw a strategy bring me back down, like to feel the ground underneath me. Because anxiety, especially when you have, a chemical predisposition, a biological predisposition, it can be so overwhelming. It's like trying to stand up in the ocean when there are waves. Just you're not going to win. And what gave me that stability were those breathing mechanisms that just allowed me to feel my place in the world, allowed me to separate myself out from the situation, from the lostness, from the bereftness of our own lives. That really, really transformed me.
Wow.
Yeah, it's amazing. There's so many different grounding techniques that are very helpful.
I'm sure, yeah. So. Those are the ones that always work for me, and specifically the works of Pima Chodron. She has a whole bunch, but the ones that, and it was this therapist, his name is Mark Roberts. I'm happy to say he's retired, I believe. An incredible person, so generous. He has a very, very gracious, accepting voice. And he introduced me, and the first book of hers that I read is called The Wisdom of No Escape. And the title sold me. The Wisdom of No Escape, where the goal is not, how do I get out of this? How do I escape this? But there's something real. There's something, this is a part of your life that you could take with you, and you can find kindness, you can find compassion, even in the torrential suffocation that anxiety brings, to find a window of compassion, of just being able to take those breaths where you don't feel that you are, the walls of your own life and narrative are caving in on you, is something that I found incredibly uplifting and almost like widening. It widened the scope of my life. I didn't feel like I was always going through some tunnel or narrow passageway, but I have firm footing underneath me.
But when we're talking about therapists, I want to go back to something you mentioned in the beginning, which was about finding a good fit with the therapist. And how that could be hard. Very hard. So that, like, you're saying that from experience or just from knowing this in general?
Oh, I'm definitely saying it from experience. I saw a therapist who has an excellent reputation, and I'm not holding this against them, but I saw a therapist when I was in 12th grade. In 12th grade is when my hair started going white, and I had a full-on anxiety, depression. My world was upside down. And I went to see a therapist, and there were two issues. And I think these are the two main issues that often come up when finding a good therapist. Number one, there was like a logistic practical issue. He was seeing patients in his home. I think I didn't feel comfortable going to this patient's home, given where it was located, giving people mutual connections. I didn't feel that ease and that comfort. So right away I was stepping in, and I was clenched up and I was blocked off. I was like, emotionally like this. So I think the first thing in finding a therapist is knowing what logistically works for you. If you have a great therapist in, Omaha, that's not going to be great because you want to see them in person. Oh, you're not going to like this. I don't believe in Zoom therapy. So I know everybody does Zoom therapy.
The research is against you, but
yeah. I think it's a sellout. I think everybody sold out. Can I tell you why?
No, I personally agree with you that it's not the same.
I want to tell you why.
The research doesn't show that.
It's something Mark Roberts told me. It was so profound. I don't know if I've ever shared this before. I used to smoke in my 20s, cigarettes. I was the opposite of a social smoker. It was my personal, thank God it wasn't anything worse.
Did it make you less anxious?
Yes. It was my coping mechanism. And I only do it was like a private ritual. I would only smoke either like you're a close friend if you've seen me smoke. Like I've done very privately and very this. And I used to go to Dr. Roberts, and his office was on, I think, the Upper East Side at the time. And I one time asked him, I said, I'm like, he wasn't, part of the community. So I'm like, well, what do I have to lose? Like, can I smoke in here? And he said, it stuck with me. I thought it was so profound. He said, no, but not because I have an issue with you smoking or smoke in general, but in this room, I want your only release to be the words that you share with me. Your only release should be the words that you share with me. And if you're smoking while you're talking in therapy, you have another release, and that's the breath and the smoke that comes out. And to me, part of the magic of therapy is being in that room alone with somebody, and your only release is to talk. And the moment that, for me at least, I'm not here to. If you're seeing therapy on Zoom, I'm not telling you to stop. God bless it. The research is against me, so you could fast forward this part. I'm talking as a patient, not as a researcher.
I think it's very ideal what you're saying. But like sometimes the barrier is needed.
In that room, you want your only release to be that self-disclosure, that vulnerability, the words that you share. And the moment I'm somebody on Zoom, to me, the entire practice of therapy has a little bit sold out, a little bit, because now I'm in a meeting. It's a therapy meeting. What's going on? What's happening? I want to feel that suffocation. I don't want to be able to be on my phone or whatever. And it becomes like, it's like going to the gym, but not doing the proper workout to me. I want to be in the gym. The only thing I can do is to lift. And that's something he said that always stuck with me, that your release should be that exploration in the words that you share.
I agree with you in an ideal world.
Yeah, totally.
No, sometimes it's needed. Like,
let me just be
for sure.
Let me say it again.
Meaning that
go to Zoom therapy.
No, meaning the barrier's helpful, like for the process, because the person's not at that point yet where they could even do that.
So you're saying like eventually transition in person.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the only doorway you're willing to walk through.
I'll give you another example. Like let's say with a kid or a teenager, right, where they can't look you in the eye. They're not in the place yet to be able to do that, to look you in the eye and talk to you face to face and be vulnerable like that, right? So what do? You have them color. You play a game.
Yeah.
Right? So you're
giving them an outlet for it. Yeah. Correct.
Yeah. So that's a method.
Correct. But it's creating that tension in the room where the therapist can guide the release, rather than if you're in your own office or bedroom or side room or wherever you are, you're still too in control of the surroundings. So your therapist doesn't have the same power to release.
What do you think? No, I agree with you. Ideally, I definitely agree with you.
So anecdotally, I would say that based on my own experience, that when you're in a Zoom, first of all, there are a lot more distractions that you can get distracted, right? Like if you're a
notifications
patient,
popping up, your
phone,
coming in, whatever,
like you could
right?
easily you could like either mute yourself or block the screen or just like 1 second. Like you could also like toggle with, like, let's say you're on a computer, right? You could split screen and you could be like watching last night's football game or like the highlights, or you're watching today's game. Like you could, or be working. Like your mind is not. That would be point one, why I would say that there is a real difference on how what you're doing as opposed to like fully committing to the process. That's one. And the second one is that there are certain cues that it's hard to pick up on Zoom. Like I'm an attorney, so I do depositions. I hate doing depositions on Zoom because there are certain times where I'm looking at somebody and I'm crossing them or trying to enter, like to bring out a point or bring out something, and the twitch of an eye or the movement of the body or where you put your hand or where everything is almost leads me into my next question. And if I'm the Zoom element,
but I don't want
to. Well, the nonverbal. Well, a huge part of communication is nonverbal.
Right.
So.
I still haven't fully answered your last question. You asked me about choosing a therapist, and I told you about my own journey. The first part, I was in the middle of a story about when I saw a therapist when I was in 12th grade. So the first issue I said was logistical issues. Is in the right house, Zoom, do I feel comfortable in this space? Is it too close to the community, outside the community? From, not from, these are all issues that people need to find the right comfort zone for. There's a second set of issues, and I remember, which is the line of inquiry, meaning how do they access you? How do you guys interact with one another? And I remember when I saw this therapist in 12th grade, 11th or 12th grade, I think it was 12th grade, and I told them that my hair is going white, and I remember their opening question was, have you ever thought of dyeing it? And to me, I was like, it was too pragmatic that I was like, oh, this is not going to work for me, this line of inquiry. Like that hyper pragmatism to it. And some people love that. Some people want a therapist, which is like, give me the answer. What should I do? Let's talk through the issue and get to the end. And for me, and I already knew at that point, like, I'm not trying to figure out this problem. I'm trying to figure out, how do I react and explore problems without falling apart? And that requires a different line of inquiry. And I think a lot of therapists in general have veered towards a little bit more practical. And I think that's good for most people. Most people want...
It depends what the problem is.
Whatever it is. Right. But for me, I wanted to really like get under the hood and get into the kishkas. Why am I falling apart right now? Why do I feel so inadequate? What am I grappling with? What is outside of my emotional vision that is haunting me, that if I at least learned to understand better or explore better or have developed better language for, I will be able to cope better. And then I found other therapists later on in life who really were able to give me that guidance.
So did you stay with this therapist for a while, or you
Which
trusted
one?
your gut, the one that was not your style?
No, one and done.
Oh, okay.
It was like
that's good.
like a bad shit
That's good.
date.
Right.
One and done.
No, but
Dead on
I
arrival.
think that's important that people
one and done. One and
should
done.
realize that it could take
Time.
and
Yeah,
it could take a
sometimes
few
it takes
tries of
take
different
a few
therapists
times.
until you get to
I knew at that point
one that's a
and
good
done.
fit for you.
I saw my other therapist that I saw, which is Dr. Roberts, and I saw someone named Dr. Barris in Queens, who I've spoken about many, many times, especially in the series we did on dating, much more extensively.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank
Wow.
you so
Thank
much
you
for
so
coming
much.
on,
Oh my gosh,
for sharing.
my
It's-
pleasure. This was a
This
joy.
is great.
What a privilege to be here.
Thank you so much for watching or listening to this week's episode. I was in the room and I felt very uncomfortable when he's saying how jealous he is of living Lchaim and me, and it's definitely very kind. And I definitely see how he's changing worlds and breaking worlds, and I definitely have to reciprocate and say, I respect what Dovid's doing with 1840 and breaking down the boundaries that are existing. And you could see him doing that in this episode of like nonchalantly talking about therapy as probably as it should really be spoken about. Like, yeah, let's talk about it normally. Like, we go to therapy. That's something that we do and maybe hide it, but we do it. Or talking about jealousy, how it's not really just a third grade level kind of thing. It's something that as long as we get older and we have people around us in our circle, we're gonna have those feelings, and to acknowledge it and to know it and to also reach out. So if you haven't yet checked out 1840 to hear Dovid's groundbreaking conversations, you could go and hear that. And if you didn't yet call our friends at Relief, you can go to reliefhelp.org or give them a call at 718-431-9501. Until next time, stay safe. Living Lchaim.